Good morning, class 9 students. I welcome you all on this online platform provided by Jagriti Classes. We are doing chapter 9th of your physics, that is science textbooks. So we'll be continuing with the chapter that is force and laws of motion. In the last video lecture, we were discussing some of the in-text question. We have discussed the introductory part of this chapter, that is, what do you understand by the term force? Then we saw you have different categories or different types of force. One was balanced force, the next one was unbalanced force. I gave you the examples, then we discussed different points which come under balanced and unbalanced forces, and then I also provided you with a comparative chart of both along with their examples. So then these were the questions which we were discussing given on page number 118 of your CBSE class 9 textbooks. So question number 1 we have already dealt with in the previous video lecture. Because we have discussed inertia and mass, what kind of relation do you have between both these terms, that is inertia and mass? So now we'll be starting with the second question that is given on page number 118 itself. It is given in the following example. Try to identify the number of times the velocity of ball changes. You have to identify how many times is the velocity of the ball changing, okay? And for identifying the change in velocity, how to identify this? You know, velocity is a vector quantity. Vector means velocity is that physical quantity which is associated with a numerical value that tells its magnitude, and then you have the direction. So because we know that velocity is a vector quantity, we have already discussed when we were dealing with chapter 8 motion. So velocity has a magnitude as well as direction. Okay, whereas speed is a scalar quantity, it only contains magnitude. Here we are asked change in velocity. It means either the magnitude means the numerical quantity, the amount. So either if the magnitude is changing, you will say velocity is changing. Or if there is change in direction, the magnitude is same but the direction is changing, then also you will say there is a change in velocity. So let's do the question. See here, initially a football player kicks a football to another player. From the first line itself, that a football player kicks a football, you know that you can imagine the condition that from the first line what we can conclude. Firstly, the initial velocity of the football was 0, and now from this, when the football player kicked the football, its velocity changed. Velocity would probably increase from 0. So initially we are saying that the football was at rest. This implies the initial velocity of football is 0. Okay, you can write the unit meter per second. Then we said that the football player kicked the football. It means in the first case, the velocity became u from 0. Or let's take here v. So we are saying that in the first line, we can infer from the velocity 0 meter per second, the value of velocity changed to v. So now the velocity is, let's write it v1 meter per second. Then let's read further. So here you can see there is one change in velocity from 0 to v1. Now this player kicks the football to another player of his team who kicks the football towards the goal. So now from this line you can conclude the second change in velocity. That is, the football was moving with the velocity v1. Now the velocity of the football, when it reached the next player, when the football reached another player and this player again kicked the football towards the goal, it means the direction of the football where it was moving, it has changed, okay? The next player who received the football, he kicked the football towards the goal, it means in a different direction. So because we have the change in direction, we'll say the velocity changed from v1 to v2. Yes, it is possible that the magnitude of v1 and v2 remains the same, but it definitely here you know what is changing. The direction is changing. So because we have change in direction, we'll say that any change in direction also causes the velocity to change. Hence, this one would be the second change in velocity. Now reading further, we get the goalkeeper of the opposite team collects the football. Collects mean he has gathered the football. He took the football into his hands. So from this you have the third change in velocity, that the football which was moving with the velocity v2, when the football moving with the velocity v2 reached the goalkeeper, he made the football to come at rest. He gathered the football. This means now the velocity from v2 became 0. Okay, so this, if you write the velocity v3, then the velocity value of v3 is 0. And next is what? And then the goalkeeper collects the football and kicks it towards the player of his own team. Now once the goalkeeper collected the football, so the velocity was 0. Now the goalkeeper again kicked the football towards his own team. So we say that from 0 meter per second, now you have the velocity changed to the value v4. So now can you tell me, yes, it is but obvious that 4 times the velocity is changing. So here the answer would be 4, and here it is written also identify the force in each case, the agent supplying the force. So the agent supplying the force, first one would be your first player, then this velocity change is due to the kick from another player, this is due to collection of football by the goalkeeper, and this change is due to kicking of football again by the goalkeeper. So these are the agents you can write. And the answer would be how number of times the velocity is changing. So the velocity is changing 4 times. This would be the answer. Now let's move on to the next question. It is given, explain why some of the leaves may get detached from a tree if we vigorously shake its branches. So the reason for this is inertia. Inertia, I told you in the last video lecture, what do you mean by this term inertia? Inertia is every object has a natural tendency, if the object is at rest, it wants to remain at rest, okay? It does not want any disturbance. And if the object is moving, it tends to remain in motion, that is, it wants to keep moving. Okay, then what kind of, when this state would change? If the object is sitting at rest, it would remain at rest until and unless you apply an external force on that object. When I was discussing inertia with you in the previous video lecture, I have given you examples that if this stylus, that is my pen, if it is resting on my palm, it would rest on the palm itself until I apply some external force and bring it to motion. So this question is also an application of practical example of inertia. So it is given that when we shake the branch of a tree vigorously, then the leaves fall. Why? If we see that this is a branch of tree where the leaves are attached, okay? Now what you are doing, you are shaking this branch vigorously. The leaves have their inertia. I told you every object, either small or big, has inertia in it. Yes, the mass of the object defines the magnitude of inertia. More heavier is the object, more is the inertia of that object. But here we have that these leaves all would have their own inertia. That is, when the tree is at resting state, these leaves have inertia of rest. This actually we have skipped in. See, inertia can be divided into 3 types. First one would be inertia of rest, then you have inertia of motion, then you have inertia of direction. What is inertia of rest? That when the object is at rest, it tends to remain at rest. This is known as inertia of rest. Inertia of motion would be in a similar manner, that when any object is in motion, it tends to remain at motion. And inertia of direction, when any object is moving in a particular direction, it will move in that direction until you apply any external force. So these are the 3 kinds of inertia you have with you. So here the leaves have inertia of rest. Because they are stuck with the tree, they are resting on the tree branch itself. Now what you are doing, you are shaking the branch. Okay. A person is shaking this branch vigorously. Mind, this is a rough sketch, okay? Do not go on my sketching skills. So the person is vigorously shaking its branches, the branch of the tree. So what would happen? When the person shakes the branch, this branch of the tree comes in motion. While the leaves which are attached, because they are having inertia of rest, they will try to maintain their position of rest. But whenever you are, this is your branch, whenever you are shaking the branch comes in motion. But the leaves try to maintain their inertia of rest, that is, they try to maintain their position. And because these leaves try to maintain their position, because they have the inertia of rest in them, what happens? The branch moves forward and backward. But the leaves, they tend to remain in the same position, and as a result, when the branch moves backward and forward vigorously, then these leaves get detached from the branch, because leaves want to remain in the same position. This is your branch, this was the leaf. Now you are shaking the branch, the leaves do not want to come in motion, okay? This is your attached leaf. So when you shake the branch will definitely move, but the leaves, because they have the inertia of rest, they would try to maintain their position, and as a result, because they are we can say they are lazy, they want to remain at the same position, but we are moving the branch, so the leaves get detached, the leaves break down. So this would be the answer to the question. Now no need to write, draw any kind of diagram. You just have to write whatever we have discussed in the simple language. Okay? I hope you understood this question. Then the last question of this page is, why do you fall? Why do you fall in the forward direction when a moving bus brakes to stop and fall backwards when it accelerates from rest? This is again a very important question. And this is a daily life examples which you should know. It is given, then when a moving bus brakes, okay, then the person falls backward. Okay, the person falls forward, when a moving bus applies brakes. That whenever a bus is there, the bus is moving, and whenever it would apply the brakes, the person, whosoever is sitting, the passengers, they all tend to fall forward. Now the question is, why so? So this is again based on the concept of inertia. Now you will realize that inertia is so important in our day-to-day life. Everywhere we feel inertia, but now you have studied what do you mean by term inertia and all. So the question is, now I have told you the concept behind the question, the answer would be because of inertia. But why? You have to justify or elaborate your answer. So it is given, see, let the passenger, any passenger is sitting in the bus, okay? What you have, the bus is moving forward. It means the feet of passenger which are on the floor of the bus, they are in direct contact with the bus. So these feet of the passengers, because they are directly in contact with the bus, it is also in motion, and yes, the whole body of that object is in motion, it is moving with the bus. But what happens when brakes are applied suddenly, or when the brakes are applied? As soon as you apply the brakes, the bus stops. And because the legs of the patient are in direct contact with the bus, once the bus stops, the legs of the person or passenger also stop. But because the upper body of the person is not in direct contact with the bus, it tends to remain in motion. Firstly, listen again. Initially, what was the situation? The bus was moving, that is, the bus is moving in a particular direction, and the passengers, all the passengers who are sitting in the bus, they are also moving forward with the bus. But once brakes are applied, after application of brakes, you know the bus would stop, obviously. When the bus stops, this person's legs, which are in direct contact with the floor of the bus, they would also stop immediately when the bus stops. But because the upper body of the person, which is having inertia of motion, okay, it is having inertia of motion, means it wants to remain in motion. It is having the inertia. So this person, the upper body of the person, it tries to remain in motion. But when the bus has stopped, the legs of the person will stop, and it would take some time for the upper body to change its inertia of motion to the inertia of rest. And this, due to this time lag between the stopping of the bus and stopping of the upper body of passenger, we tend to bend forward, okay, because our body, the upper body of the passenger, it tends to remain in the inertia of motion, but the legs are lagging back, so we tend to fall forward, in the forward direction. So this is the answer to the question. Now the next is, now I think this you can do, that why we fall backwards when the bus starts, because see, the bus is at rest. That means the bus is having inertia of rest. The passenger sitting in the bus is also at rest. But what happens once the bus starts? The legs of the person in direct contact with the bus, they will, once the bus comes in motion, the legs of the person, because they are in direct contact with the surface of the bus, they will also change their state of rest to state of motion. Whereas what we have next is, okay, these they have started moving, the legs start moving with the bus, but the upper body of the passenger, which is not in contact directly with the bus, it has the inertia of rest. We say that upper body of the passenger has inertia of rest. So because when the bus starts to move, the legs of the passenger also starts to move, but the upper body tries to maintain its inertia of rest. As a result, the passenger falls backward when the bus accelerates from rest. This was the reason to this question. I hope you understood that because once the bus starts, the passenger's legs also tries to move forward, but because the rest of the body tries to maintain the inertia of rest, your legs are moving forward, so you will automatically bend backwards. So this is the answer to this question. Now moving on to the next. Now we are starting the topic of laws of motion. I told you we have 3 laws of motion, the first, second and third law. These laws of motion were given by Newton. So now before discussing what you have, this is a diagram again from your CBSE NCERT textbooks. You have that this experimentation was performed by Galileo, and what he did was he took 2 inclined planes, okay, with the similar slope. That is the slope of A, the angle of inclination of A and this B is equal. So he took such 2 inclined planes and he proved experimentally that if we take a circular object, any ball sort of object, and if we drop the ball from one inclined plane, then the ball would travel to the next plane at the same height. What I am trying to say is, let's suppose you have 2 inclined planes. The angle of inclination of both the inclined plane is theta. Any angle you can take, both of them are 60 degree, both of them are 75, any. Now we are saying that I have a circular object, a ball, and if I drop the ball from a height of 10 meters, then this ball would travel down and would tend to move forward on the next inclined plane having the same angle of inclination to the same height. Once you drop a ball from a given height, the ball would tend to cover the same height on the next plane also. So these experiments were done by Galileo. Then next is what? He said that if you change the slope of the inclined plane, here we took angle of inclination or slope, whatever you understand. Here we took 2 same angles of inclination. Now he said that if you are, see, we are required this path only, okay? So now a line diagram is drawn. What is that? A circular object you are taking. If you have the same inclined plane, then the ball would cover the same height. From where it is dropped, it would cover the same height, okay? If it is dropped from a height of 10 meters, it would cover the same height 10 meters in the experiments. Okay. But if you change the slope or if you change the angle of inclination, what you observe is the ball, it covers more distance, okay? Once you change the angle of inclination, see, the angle of inclination is theta. Here it would be theta 1 and the angle of inclination here is theta 2. So you have different angles of inclination, One minute. So what you will observe is that the ball would cover the same distance, but because it cannot have the height, so it would move in a horizontal direction, but it would cover the same distance. Okay, so these experiments were performed by Galileo, and these are even given in your NCERT textbooks. So see now what you have next is, we'll be discussing the first law of motion. Now, all the laws of motion were given by Newton, and what Newton did is, Newton researched further on the experiments of Galileo, and then he formulated 3 laws. Okay, so these are known as Newton's laws of motion. So first law of motion, it is also called law of inertia. So remember, this first law of motion given by Newton, it is also known as law of inertia. Then the second point would be, okay, now you have an idea what do you mean by the term inertia here. So let's write the statement of this law. For the first law and the third law, you have to remember the statement. These are very easy, these are theoretical topics, but for the second law, it is important because you have a mathematical derivation. So talking about the first law, all the 3 laws were given by Newton. The first law of motion is also known as law of inertia. Then the statement is, if the object is at rest, or if the body is at rest, it tends to remain at rest. And if the object is in motion, it tends to remain in motion. So this is the statement of inertia. This is what we defined inertia in a similar manner, that if the object is at rest, it tends to remain at rest. And if the object is in uniform motion, then it tends to maintain the same motion. See now what next is, until and unless an external unbalanced force is applied. So this is the statement for the first law of motion proposed by Newton. And this, because you have the statement, this is the definition of inertia. In turn, this law is known as law of inertia. What we have in this law, let's recall, if the body is at rest, it tends to remain at rest. If the body or the object is in motion, it tends to remain in motion until and unless. Where this situation is possible, it is possible only to that extent until you do not apply an external unbalanced force. External means you are applying the force from the outer source, from the outside, and unbalanced we have already discussed, okay? So this inertia of rest or inertia of motion gets disturbed whenever you apply an external unbalanced force to the object. So this is the statement of first law. I hope you got the statement. It is very clear that the inertia of rest or the inertia of motion of the object would change only if you apply an external unbalanced force. So this is the statement. This is the simple first law. Now you have many examples. See, this is an example, and many other such examples are given in your textbooks. This is that a fielder pulls his hands gradually with the moving ball while holding a catch. Okay, this example belongs to the second law, sorry. So for the first law, what you have is, let's suppose you have an object here. Okay, this is your object, and let's suppose its mass is m. So now you try to push this object, and you are applying a force of 5 newtons. We already discussed the unit of force, that is Newton, in the introductory video. So you are applying a force of 5 Newton on this object. What would happen is, this object is not moving. It means that this 5 Newton of force, you know that the surface, it also applies friction force. You have definitely studied about friction in your previous junior classes. So what is friction? Friction is a type of contact force because this object and the surface is in direct contact. So the surface, the ground will apply a friction force on the object in the opposite direction to the direction of force or to the direction of motion. So the direction of friction is always opposite to the direction of motion here. Okay, this is the fact that friction is a contact force, that is, it is applied when the object is in direct contact with the ground itself, and this ground applies a friction force. So we are saying that whenever you are applying a force of 5 Newton, the object is not moving. Why? Because you have a friction force which is opposing your external force. But once you increase your force and now you are applying a force of 7 Newton, you see that the object starts moving. So you can conclude that this 7 Newton force works as an unbalanced force. That is, when you were applying a force of 5 Newton, okay, then the friction was being applied in the opposite direction, but it also had the value of 5 Newton. When you increased your force to 6 Newton in the same direction, then also the object didn't move. Why? Because again you had the friction and its magnitude was also equal to the force. And these type of force which are equal in magnitude but opposite in direction, such forces are known as balanced forces. So the object was not moving because this frictional force was balancing the external force. Therefore we say that the object is maintaining its inertia of rest. And the same I have written here in the statement, that the object is at rest, then it tends to remain at rest. For how much time can it remain at rest? Until and unless you are applying an external force and that external force is unbalanced in nature. So till that time, see here, you have balanced forces, so the object is maintaining the inertia of rest. Object is put on rest. But once you apply an unbalanced force, that is, the friction is 6 Newton, but you are applying a force of 7 Newton now, and the friction is of 6 Newtons. So what do you observe? When you apply a force of 7 Newton which is greater than the friction, the box starts moving, your object starts moving. So you have to apply an external unbalanced force if you want to change the inertia of that object. So this is an example for the first law of motion. Now next move on to the second law of motion. Second law of motion, it was again given by Newton, and the statement of second law is what? Okay, before discussing the statement, we'll be seeing that in second law, Newton introduced a new physical quantity, and that physical quantity is called momentum. Okay, momentum is represented by alphabet P. So what is momentum? Momentum is a physical quantity. Let us write the definition of momentum. It is a physical quantity which provides a relation between mass of the object with the velocity. Okay, so momentum is a quantity which links the mass of any object with its velocity. And for the formula, what you have is momentum can be written as product of mass and velocity. And product means you have to multiply both the parameters. So momentum P would be equals to, mass is denoted by small m and velocity is small v. So the formula for momentum is m into v. Okay, m multiplied by v gives you the value of momentum here. And talking about the unit of momentum, can you derive the SI unit of momentum? See, for mass, the unit of mass is what? Kg. And the unit of velocity, the SI unit is meter per second. So in turn, the unit of momentum becomes kg meter per second. So this is the SI unit of momentum. And momentum is that physical quantity which provides you with the relationship between the mass of object with its velocity, and the formula for momentum is product of mass and velocity. Its unit is kg meter per second. So now you should know. And what is the physical significance? Actually, we cannot explain clearly the significance of momentum. Why? You can take this as any object which has a certain mass. If it is moving with a constant or any kind of velocity, then we say that that object has some momentum. This is actually the physical significance of momentum. Let's suppose you are running in the morning, okay? You are taking a run. Then you have certain mass and you are running with a certain value of velocity. So you can say that any object, that is, you are having mass and you are running with the velocity, so you can say that you are having a momentum while you are running. And if you get tired and now you start to walk, then what happens? The mass remains the same, whereas your velocity, that is speed with a particular direction. Velocity is what? It is speed with a given particular direction. So when you start walking, the mass remains the same, but the velocity, it decreases or the velocity reduces. So you can say that now our momentum has decreased or the momentum has reduced. So this is actually the physical concept or the physical importance of momentum. And it is nothing, it is the product of mass and velocity. So now we will be starting with the second law of motion, and now we'll be studying the statement, and then we'll be seeing the derivation of second law of motion. So let's revise first. We have done with the first law. What was the first law? First law states that when an object is at rest, it tries to remain at rest. When the object is in motion, it tries to remain in motion until and unless an external unbalanced force is applied. So this was your first law. Okay, now we'll be starting with the second law. I hope you understood the quantity momentum which we discussed. So let's start the statement of second law of motion. So second law, it states that the rate of change of momentum is directly proportional, because now you see the term momentum is coming in the statement. So we discussed the topic of momentum previously, and then we are starting with the statement. So it states that the rate of change of momentum is directly proportional to the applied external force. So this gives you the statement of your second law of motion. That is, it states that the rate of change of momentum is directly proportional to the applied external force. Now what we have is, if we do the derivation or mathematical formulation of second law, then from the statement itself we'll start. But in every derivation you have to write what you are assuming. So let an object has mass m, okay? We are assuming that we have an object which is having a mass m. Now we say that initially the object is moving, okay? I'll write in short, initially it is moving with initial velocity u. You have to learn the symbols. U stands for initial velocity. Then we say that when force is applied on the object, and force is denoted by the symbol capital F. So we are having an object of mass m which was moving with initial velocity u. See, this is the object of mass m and it is moving with initial velocity u. Now we say that a force is being applied on this object, and when you apply the force, the velocity will change. So we say when force is applied, when F force is applied, then the velocity changes, and after changing, the velocity becomes V, that is your final velocity. So after the application of external force, now the object is moving with the velocity V. Okay? And the time taken for this velocity change, the time taken is represented by small t. So we are starting the derivation or mathematical formulation. We have assumed that let an object has mass m, it is moving with initial velocity u. When a force F is applied on the object, then the velocity becomes v, and the time taken in this velocity change from u to v is denoted by small t. Now, according to the statement we will be starting, we said that rate of change of momentum. Here we said that rate of change of momentum is directly proportional to applied external force. So from this statement, if I write this statement in mathematical form, rate of change of momentum. So first I have to find the rate of change of momentum. Rate of change of momentum is denoted by the symbol small p, is directly proportional. So we'll have a proportionality sign, is directly proportional to the external force, or you can just simply write force. So first I'll be finding the rate of change of momentum, and then I'll be proportionating it to the force. So the rate of change of momentum would be what? See, you have to find the rate of change. So firstly we'll find the change of momentum. So we say that to find this, you'll have stepwise, let initial momentum of the object, which is represented by P initial or P1, you can say, Pi here is mu, because momentum is what? Momentum is mass of the object multiplied by velocity. So initial momentum would be mass multiplied by initial velocity u. Then we will say the final momentum of the object, that is P final, it would be mass of the object multiplied by final velocity v. Now you have to find change in momentum. So what would be the change in momentum? Change in momentum can be represented as delta p, and delta p would be P final minus P initial. So substituting the values, it would be mv minus mu, and taking m common, you will be getting v minus u. So this you get change in momentum. Now you have to find the rate of change of momentum, and I told you when we were discussing motion chapter, what do you mean by rate? The term rate means divide that quantity with time. So we have to find rate of change of momentum. That means rate of change of momentum would be what? Delta p is for change in momentum. So rate would be delta p divided by time interval t. And delta p is what? See, delta p is equal to mv minus u. So you will get mv minus u divided by t here. And now previously what we had that this rate of change of momentum is directly proportional to force. So now what you have to do is, you have found out the rate of change of momentum. This is the rate of change of momentum. Now we'll be doing that rate of change of momentum is directly proportional to force. So the rate of change of momentum mv minus u by t is directly proportional to force. This is according to the statement, which now we are deriving the second law. And you know that acceleration, the formula of acceleration is what? Rate of change of velocity, that is v minus u upon t. So see, you have this vector v minus u upon t. So v minus u upon t can be written as small a, acceleration. So now putting the values, instead of this whole v minus u upon t, I'll write a. So you have ma proportional to f, or you can say f is proportional to ma. It's one and the same thing. So now to remove proportionality sign, you have to put a constant, and the constant here would be small k. And this gives you the second law of motion, that is F equals to kma. Okay, this makes the second law of motion. Now F is what? F is force here, k is constant, that is the proportionality constant, m is the mass of object, and a signifies acceleration of the object. Now you can also write that what is the significance of second law. We have already done the statement. According to the statement, we have done the derivation. The importance of second law is that it introduces a new physical parameter, momentum. And next is, it gives you the magnitude of force. By using second law, you can find the amount or the magnitude of force. So this gives you the magnitude of force as well. Now, this proportionality constant, okay, a question comes in exam, if you have to find the value of the proportionality constant, or in other terms we can say, a question comes, you should know, define 1 unit of force. So what is 1 unit force? 1 unit means if mass of the object is 1 kg, acceleration of that object is 1 meter per second square, then the force would be what? Force would also be equal to 1 unit. And the unit of force is, you can derive, and if force is equal to 1 unit, then you can find the value of k. K would be what? K would be F, and this ma would be transposed as denominator. So you will have k equals to F upon ma. And now you have everything to be 1 unit. That means 1, 1, 1. This gives the answer k to be 1. And if we substitute k equals to 1 in this equation, then the final equation would become F equals to ma. And this is the final equation for the derivation. This step completes your derivation of second law of motion. Okay, so, and you have to define 1 unit of force. 1 unit of force is that amount of force when the mass of the object is 1 kg and its acceleration is 1 meter per second square. Then such force is defined to be 1 unit of force. And this completes the derivation of second law of motion. Now you would be asked that, now you will be given numericals, you would be given mass and acceleration, and you would be asked to find the force. And now again we'll be seeing the unit of force. We already derived the unit of force in our introductory class. Let's recap it. Force is what? Force is equal to ma. And I told you how to derive the units using the formulas. So the unit of mass is kg, SI unit of acceleration is meter per second square. So the unit of force becomes kg meter per second square. And this unit is also known as Newton. So this gives you the unit of force, kg meter per second square, or newtons. So this completes your second law of motion. In the next class, we'll be discussing this examples, which is based on second law, okay? 1-2 more examples we'll be seeing, then we'll be moving to the third law of motion, and at last we'll be studying conservation of momentum. So this is at most for today. Thank you for joining the class. If you have any sort of query, you can contact us anytime. I hope you like this video lecture. Okay, stay tuned. Thank you for joining the class. Stay home, stay safe.